Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark. With Easter coming up, Dad tackles lamb.
Good day, folks. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was seen to go. But it disappeared one day to where she didn't know until on Easter morning it showed up under the guise of a French-legged lamb called Gigot. So Gigot lamb. Oh, he must be a mean guy. That's not a very appetizing way to start a segment on food. Hey, but it's reality. It's what happens. I remember one time a guy was talking about, he had a group of people and he says, how many of you people have had a sheep roast? A roasted sheep? And nobody raised their hand. He said, have you ever had lamb? Oh, they all raised their hand. He said, well, lamb is a young sheep, obviously, from 5 to 12 months. It gets beyond that, it's what they call a yearling, and then it gets around 2 years, it gets a mutton. At that point is what it's called.
Hence the expression mutton dressed as lamb.
Yeah, there you go. And it's associated with springtime and Easter because, again, in the what they call the lambing season starts then because it goes through the whole cycle of the lamb growing, the fleece, everything, being shaved in the fall. So you have the young lambs coming out, and it's Easter rebirth, Easter things, and other holiday festivities. So it's a nice dish doing that way. There are basically four cuts of lamb. There's the loin, the rack, the shoulder, and the leg. Now both the shoulder and parts of the leg, mainly the shank, those would be braised the same way as the brisket and the other cuts because they're very tough pieces of meat. However, the other ones, will all be something done roasted, usually slowly. And lamb over the years, at least in my lifetime, has changed considerably. Everybody used to cook living daylights out of it, at least in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing a lot of other cultures too, with tagines and all different kinds of stew type lamb things. But we've learned, we of the English, Irish, Anglo-Saxon area type people have been now learning not to, cook it rare. So you want the rare when you're cooking it, internal temperature to be about 125 to 140, and nice and pink. And if you're having a bone, bone-in leg of lamb, you want to figure what you have to do for quantities. You should figure around 12 to 14 ounces a person, and that'll net you out minus the bone of about 5 or 6 ounces per person for that. Then I started thinking about lamb and mint jelly. I could always never understand. I'm not a big mint man anyway, but lamb and mint jelly, I always used to say, what the heck are they putting all that goo all over it? Well, that kind of originated going back, and I found a kind of interesting historical fact that in the 17th century, Elizabeth, the queen, decided to help the sheep growers to put in, say, when anybody has roast lamb, they ought to serve bitter herbs with it. And the bitter herbs being that if they were bitter, they wouldn't like the lamb. If there's less lamb killed, therefore more lamb sheared, and more lamb sheared means more money for the wealth guys. So I had never heard that before.
Wow.
So I guess mint was, and that might be an apocryphal tale as well, but I saw it repeated a couple of places. But mint was something that was available then at the time, and the acidic quality of that, so the fruit sort of offsets the fattiness, the potential fattiness in the lamb. So it's, but it's now evolved. I think it came over here that people couldn't get mint all year round. So what they do is make jelly out of it. So they have it in the wintertime and other years when it was other times of year rather, when it was not available. I love the taste of mustard with lamb. When I do roast lamb a lot, or even the rack at times, I'll just make a little mustard butter with softened butter, Dijon mustard, a little Worcestershire, a little salt and pepper, and maybe some rosemary. And just when you slice the meat, left alone before you serve it. You just put a little glaze of this butter on it. It gives you perfect flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And even a rack of lamb, sometimes when I put it in the saute pan to sort of render out some of the fat, I do that on top of the stove, but always having a preheated oven. And then what I'll do is put the layer of Dijon mustard on that fat top now, and put some crumbs in it, crumbs on top, panko crumbs, something else, and then roast it. It comes out perfectly. You get 8 ribs on a rack of lamb. Most of them now come from Australia and New Zealand, and they get the lambs very much younger than Americans do. So the American rack tends to be bigger than those racks.
Okay.
It's because of the age. Also there was a dish I always loved that my mother used to make called lamb terrapin. I never knew where it really came from, but it was a dish where it was for cooked lamb when the lamb was done, what you had left over, and hard boiled eggs. And what she would do is to take some flour and butter and either lamb stock or milk, make a roux, and then she'd add to it dry mustard, Worcestershire, salt and pepper, and sometimes a little lemon. And the yolk she would sieve into the sauce. Then she'd add the chopped egg white and the lamb thing, and serve it over toast or something else. And I always loved that combination. And I do the same thing with cold meat and making a sandwich. I use hard-boiled egg chopped with again that same type of thing, mayonnaise, seasoned mayonnaise done with again dry mustard, Worcestershire, and pepper. So it makes a nice thing. So those are all the different variations of lamb. As they say, they will come out, and depending on your ethnic background, how you handle it. But it can be a very nice dish. It's got a lot of about 3 ounces, only about 175 calories. And it's got a lot of protein in it and a lot of vitamins involved in the meat. So anyway, old Mary has survived. She's now become a contrarian and is watching her garden grow. So she survived the incident.
Question, Dad. With like your lamb chops, you used to grill them, but obviously something like the shanks, you're going to do a long, low roast on.
Not roast, braise.
Braise, okay, of course. And then what about the shoulder?
Both I said that in the beginning, Mark. Both the shoulder and the shank have to be braised.
Okay.
They are very, very tough. The other ones you can roast and cut. You can get the lamb, they call the butterfly leg of lamb. They take the bone out, and that's great on the grill or anywhere. And because they have all these packaging now from both Australia and New Zealand, are almost all different kind of cuts. And the lamb burger is another great thing. You just take the lamb meat and add a little, chopped garlic into it, some rosemary, and maybe a little lemon, and it's wonderful. Lamb becomes popular in so many poor countries because they can exist on a hilly or a terrain that is not as lush, like fields of hay that you need for grazing cattle. So both goat and sheep, raised in like Greece, for example, it's very hilly, not a lot of pasture land, but they do very well. So I happen to like it. As I say, I think again the jelly probably in the line, the mint jelly in the old days probably to cover up the taste of mutton. Probably been boiled to death and be like an old shoe by the time you got it. So
I think we had a jar of mint jelly at the bistro for the diehards, but subsequently restaurants I've worked in that serve lamb, every once in a while, maybe once a year, you'll get somebody who is just beyond aggrieved that you don't have mint jelly on hand. It's like social programming. It's quite something.
Yeah, well, it's true, but like the original, I can see a mint sauce that somebody would do. It'd be like these things be like a mint chimichurri.
That's exactly what I was just thinking.
That we kind of do. I can see that. But the mint jelly, I think it was again to mask the taste. It was sweet. That just happened back in the days when sugar was changed from being a spice to being used as a sweetener. And I think that's when they started developing this idea of fruits and things, sweetened fruits being eaten with meats and things. So,
fascinating. So kind of thinking about Easter coming up and whether you're having some form of all the different lamb options outlined, or you're doing a spiral ham or something like that. My favorite go-to for versatility is Cabernet Franc from the Loire. It really, it very much like Pinot Noir, either old or new world. It is super food friendly. Nice balanced acidity, not overbearing tannins, everything that makes for a good food pairing. So we're going to give this a smell. It's got a really sort of rich, evocative nose, but a lot of unripe characteristics, like an unripe strawberry, getting some unripe cherry. Smells fantastic. Ooh. Yeah, it sits beautifully on the palate. The fruit is a lot juicier when you actually taste it. And this would be a terrific accompaniment to lamb chops. Especially, this is kind of a neat little bottling. You can see this is Beatrice and Pascal Lambert. They have 13 hectares of land in the middle of the Loire wine growing regions, and they farm it by hand with their horse Isis. So extremely, extremely localized production, and I would imagine named after the Egyptian goddess, not the terrorist organization. Anyway, this has been.
Do you know how big a hectare is?
It's close to a mile, isn't it?
2.47 acres.
All right. Since we're trafficking in specificities, one thing that's kind of neat about this particular estate is their soil composition. They have 3 dominant soil types, and because they do so little intervention, in the winemaking process, they're sort of the playfulness they get to experience in winemaking is with the soils, because that area has your clays, which has a high proportion of limestone. It has silex, which is great at capturing heat and storing it up for the plants. And also, of course, your gravel with a high quality of silica.
One thing you say when you say it tastes of the on the nose of unripe grapes, unripe cherries, strawberries rather. What is the unripe significance?
It's greener. It's greener.
Tighter?
It's less sweet.
Like tighter nose, you mean?
Yeah, more herbal. You think about any kind of unripe fruit has a greenness to it.
Okay.
Versus, the fruit at its peak, would be a good descriptor for a very fruit forward wine. And if you think about, something like Madeira, you'd be getting a stewed fruit quality. If you imagine cooking fruit down with sugar, that sort of caramelization, maderization. So that's why it's a useful sort of framework for thinking about aromas.
Very good.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and we will be back with you soon.
Bye-bye. Have a nice holiday.
Absolutely.